Hey, welcome everybody. It's 10 o'clock here, so time to get started. Thanks all for coming. And just a quick introduction here. It's myself, Johannes Ullrich. I'm the Dean of Research for the Science Technology Institute, and well, here from Jacksonville, Florida, as usual. And with me here is, well, our senior instructor here, Jason Lam, who's also my co-author and instructor for SEC 522. Jason, could you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Johannes, and hi everyone, and welcome to this workshop here. As Johannes already introduced, I'm Jason Lam, part of the author group of the SEC 522 Web Application Security course, and very excited to be doing this workshop. I do, many different kind of research, including cloud and also application security. So, this would be part of that research to share with all of you. Let's get going here with our material here. So today we prepped for multiple different areas of interest for you. Specifically, we're going to hone in on API security. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to present to you a little bit of information, a few slides, to start with, just to lay down the foundation so that we can get going. We're going to introduce to you why is API so important, and then then we're going to dive into how it actually matters to everything that we do in our daily life, and we're also going to take a look at some of the hands-on components of API security, like authentication, authorization, some of the other issues like SSRF and so on. So without further delay, let's get into it. Today our 4 different labs or exercises are going to be geared towards the API area. API are part of our everyday life. If you think about, hey, this is the cloud security theme, right? If you think about cloud, just think about AWS. What is AWS? What does AWS stand for? Amazon Web Service. The web service is the API. So everything in our daily life, you go and do online banking, it is really, many different hundreds of API working together to give you that service and experience. Now, you know, 10 years ago, we talk about API, it is some, banks, government doing things. Nowadays, every single organization use API. Whether you offer API as a service to others to integrate with your data, or in other cases, you actually use API at a SaaS provider and so on to actually leverage their service. Either way, we have used API on a day-to-day basis, and there are tons and tons of security details that we need to pay attention to. And through our exercises, through our labs, later on, there are 4 different labs. We're going to help you understand why these things that we talk about are so crucial to securing your environment, whether you're in cloud, whether you're on-prem, and so on. Your data are actually all inside all these API. So we've talked quite a bit about API. I'm not going to dwell on that point, but the API security is really, really important. Nowadays, what it comes down to is that there are a lot of security implication on the authentication, authorization area. You would in a day-to-day manner, hear about that, hey, such and such API does not or has not really authenticated user properly. There are tons of different abuses. It can be as simple as, API being very, very fast. You can interact with it very fast, and people go and scrape a lot of data very quickly. And that can induce a lot of damage to the organization offering that API service. There are also many data breaches associated with it. So what it comes down to is that if your organization is offering any of these API service or consuming any of these APIs, either through your cloud service provider or SaaS and so on, you really want to take a defensive stance. And today's exercises are all geared towards that. Now, I won't dive into this, but here is the OWASP API security top 10 for APIs. This is our golden standard for what are the major vulnerabilities over here. If you take a look at it, like the top ones are authentication, authorization, that's really taking up a lot of the um, portion here. It is not the other ones are not important, but hey, those usually take up a huge portion of the um, you know, the headlines. And today's, we're doing 4 different exercises, and we're going to be doing, this portion. What is in red are going to be the focal point of the issues that we're going to drill down on and helping all of you understand, hey, what are the issues over here? And how do you actually prevent the security issues from happening inside your organization? So those are the big thing that we're going to focus on. One thing that we want to start off with, just doing a little bit of a very brief overview. There are many different types of web services. So, there are the RPC type of web services. There are GraphQL, but more of the popular ones that we're focusing on in this exercise is going to be the REST. REST is the de facto standard for API nowadays. So if you're going to write a new API, chances are you're going to first consider whether we want to do REST. Right? There are other methods, but REST is usually the de facto standard. And the first exercise will be drilling down on REST API. But this is really a method of offering data to other people to integrate with your programs. And what it means is that we have HTTP standard since about 25, 30 years ago. Somebody decided that they want to hack the HTTP standard and make it even more so useful in the API world. So that come up as REST. And if you recall, in HTTP, there is the get, the post, the put, the delete method. Each of those represent whether you want to do an action towards the object that you're pointing the URL towards. For example, if you're pointing the URL towards customers, if you do a get, you're going to dump all the customers. And if you're going to do, for example, a put, you are creating a new record. So that delete is pretty obvious, right? So that's really, the baseline of what REST actually looks like. And I'm not going to drill down much more because in the first exercise, that's what we will be doing. Now, if I can point your attention over to the lab 1, okay? Our lab 1 is going to be, using this URL. The instructions are going to be aviata.cloud. And if you go over there and select chapter 7, that's where you will find the instructions onto our lab 1, okay? But before I flip over to walk you through that, what we have set up today for you basically looks like this, okay? So we have a very typical API environment set up for you. We've got, what it comes down to API these days are API gateway, you've got an authentication server, you've got your back-end API as well. So we've got all that stuff set up here. And what it comes down to is we have got a Kong API gateway that is sort of your north and south traffic, sort of controller. So meaning if you're on the internet, if you want to get to any of the back-end APIs, the Kong API gateway is going to govern the traffic. And it governs the traffic by looking at, hey, are you authenticated first? So the key cloak is the one that actually issued the token for, when you actually authenticate towards it, you get a token. And Kong is the one that actually validate, hey, do you have a token? If you're not having a token issued by Keycloak, I'm not going to let you in, okay? So those are some of the components, and we also have a static website there just to present some of the traffic to you. And later on, you also have a bad gateway. You see some of that effect later on. Um, I think in lab 2, we will be using that. And then there is a bypass that infrastructure. Some of the labs, we don't want you to go through the Kong. We want you to directly interface with the API itself. And that's why we actually have a bypass. And you will be using the bypass even in lab 1. So that's basically our overall architecture of all the components that we have for you. Now, having said all that, let's get into the exercise here. The aviata.cloud is where you need to go. Once you get here, you will then be able to get into the instructions, which will bring you over here towards the lab 1. You will want to click on the lab 1 over here, and that will get you to the first exercise here. The first exercise is really geared towards getting you to warm up to the environment that I showed you earlier in the graphic diagram. And you would first have to register as your own name, AKA, right? Use something that you recognize. We can't reset password. So, if you forget your password, then you would need to get another username. And that environment is controlled by us. So, don't use your favorite internet password, okay? And be aware, anything that you type in or submit over to this system will be exposed to others. Use dummy data, please, right? Unless you really, really want all your information to be exposed, right? And our application over here, our API is really geared towards an animal shelter type of experience. There are back-end, APIs that will query which animal is there and stuff like that. Okay. So we'll get you to play around with that. And also, by the way, you will be able to use Firefox or Chrome, your choice. If you use Chrome, you will also need to download additional tools to be able to alter some of your request, because Chrome just doesn't have that capability. This lab basically walk you through and give you all that basic details. Now, the bottom part of it, we're going to play around with the REST. So earlier, heard me saying a few things about REST. This is just warming you up as to what REST actually looks like. And we've got very detailed instructions over here, right? So, if you are going to use Chrome or Firefox, either way works over here. The menu looks a little different. So, we've got, for example, over at the top, we've got Firefox instructions. Over here at the bottom over here is Postman and Chrome. So if you use Chrome, you also need Postman, okay? So those are the follow the instructions and get through it. Again, I would ask that you respect others, because you have a chance to actually delete other people's data. Try not to mess around with other people's data, because we've got quite a few number of people here doing the same exercise. So if you're going to create a record yourself, mess around with it, but try not to mess around with other people's data. Okay, so we'll walk you through. This lab is going to take roughly around 20 to 25 minutes. We'll give you the time to actually do this exercise, and then we'll come back and do a debrief. Johannes, any other things to add over here as we start?
No, really, that should be pretty straightforward. When you're doing the later part of the exercise, just remember you're supposed to play with fruits that we sort of have stored in that database. When you're adding something new, it has to be a unique name for the fruit. So just come up with something unique there, add a number or so to it. When you update an existing one, that basically means that you need to pick one that already exists in the database. So those are some of the issues that people sometimes run into with this particular exercise. Other than that, I think, Jason, you covered it pretty well. And if you have any questions, please reach out via the Discord. That's probably the best way to ask questions today during this workshop. And yeah, with that, I think just give it a run and start exploring a little bit here what's going on with REST. Okay, the time is kind of up here, as you probably saw in the pop-up from the timer. Uh, We'll talk now a little bit. We do a little walkthrough through the exercise, at least some of the highlights, realizing that some of you may still be working on this a little bit, but the sansapi.com website will remain open. So you can, even after we are done with this workshop, continue to play with it and experiment with it. So just keep that in mind. Let's take a quick look here at this. So this is our page. I did already log in here. Jason explained a little bit the components we have. We do have the Keycloak authentication server. It is a well-known open source authentication server we are using here. And well, it creates these JWTs for us for OpenID Connect, where it allows us to use that authentication server to authenticate to this animal shelter application. And then, of course, what that really means is we authenticate to the APIs. The APIs themselves are behind our API gateway. At least that's kind of the idea here, how we sort of set up security around, and some of the issues that we'll play with evolve around bypassing the API gateway. And the JWT token, or JWT I should really say, that is then being used by the API gateway to make sure that we are authenticated. And that's already what the first part here of this exercise is kind of about. Let me just look. So I did already the login, and then there was some question about these network requests. Let me just go back here and show you that. So I'm going to the developer tools. The quickest way I find to get developers tools is F12. That's works for me quickest, but you can go through the menu, you can do the Shift Control I, different ways to get the same result here. And here we have our network requests. You only see network requests that happened while the tab was open. So you don't see anything here because I just opened up the developer tools. So let's do a quick refresh here. And here you sort of see the requests coming in. Actually, need to log in again because I haven't done this in a while here. Okay, so I'm logged in now. And notice how I limited this to fetch XHR. So these are now just requests that were created by JavaScript. And let's just look at an example here, the animal script. So that gets us a list of animals back, the headers. So this is the URL here that we are connecting to. So here, let me just open that URL in a separate tab here. Okay, so here you get in sort of a little JSON formatted. You have this pretty print option here to make this look a little bit better, where you have all the different animals that are in that database. Let's go back here. So anyway, that's a little bit of request. Now, a couple of things I want to point out here are these access control allow credentials, access control allow origin headers. These are headers that come back from the server telling our browser that it is allowed to use the response, even though this was a cross-origin response. So here we went from www.sansapi.com, and this request was api.sansapi.com. So cross-origin requests are being dealt with here. And if I display all of the requests, then you're seeing here also, hopefully I can see that, may have to refresh it again, but there should also be the pre-flight requests, and I probably didn't do disable cache here. Yeah, if you didn't disable cache, you don't see those because they're cached. So let me just redo this here without the cache, and let's see if I can find them now. Oh. Having issues showing them. Let me clear the log and try it once more. Okay, here we have that pre-flight request. And here in the response header, there's this access control max H. That tells us how long this response can be cached for. So that's why if you don't disable the cache, you don't see those requests. You only see them in the first time you send a request. And that's why you didn't see them. Let me just make this a little bit smaller. And then let me just look. So this was basically some part of the first one. You can use Firefox here too. Firefox will actually come in handy a little bit later because Firefox allows you to change some of the requests more easily than you can do in Google Chrome. If you do Google Chrome, and that's the demo I'll do, I'll actually use Postman to change the requests. That works as well. But anyway, so let me just, the options request, I explain that to you. So now in the API environment, of course, we do have a couple different sites here. So auth.sansapi.com, that's our authentication server, that's Keycloak. We have api.sansapi.com. These are requests that go through the API gateway. Kong is what we're using here. Again, another great open source solution. And then we have the static site, that's www.sansapi.com. As far as the user is concerned, that's the only site they're interacting with. All the other, like the api.sansapi.com, that all happens sort of in JavaScript. So the user doesn't necessarily experience those here. And then we have like the bad gateway one. Now, so let me just expand a little bit on the REST API stuff. So if we have our animal one, then if I add /1, well, it cannot get that animal. So remember, when I just send a request here without JavaScript, there is not necessarily an authentication token being sent along. Here, let me just look at one of these API requests. So we kind of see how that token works. Here's the animal request. And yeah, here we have this authorization header. That does the authentication for us. And here you have that bearer token, that JWT we mentioned before, that authenticates you. But that token is sent by JavaScript. So JavaScript creates that token. And in that pre-flight request, we specifically ask for permission to use authentication, so to send that token. And we were granted that permission, and that's sort of why we are able to send that token from JavaScript. But the browser, by default, if I just enter a URL here, will not necessarily send that token. Okay, now let me just pull up one of these requests here. So I'm now doing a copy as curl. This is one of my favorite features in the developer tools. Let me just show you quickly what it does. If I just paste this now, it basically, and it's a little bit cut off here, but it copied a curl request that perfectly emulates the request the browser sends. So you see all the headers here being added, including that authorization header. And then Postman is kind of nice. Let me just do this here. When I paste this into Postman, Postman automatically recognizes, oh, that's a request. So let me fill in all these headers, including authentication headers and such. And now we can send the request and we get our response back here. And Postman also nicely formats that for us. So now let's send this. Actually, that doesn't work. The get one, let me do this with the fruits one, and the fruits one now, let me go back. It uses our bad gateway. So here we have now the bad proxy. So we don't have authentication. By the way, whenever you see the red bars here on the side, that indicates that something is broken. So that something is intentionally broken and that you're supposed to experiment with that. Okay, let me do the same thing here. Let me go back up and actually, I'm going to go straight to Postman and connect to bypass Sans API. fruits and send a request. And now we get these fruits here that we have. And some of you may have added some additional fruits here. See some adding numbers and such. That's a great way to sort of bypass that requirement that you basically you need to have unique fruits here. Now get gets me a list of the fruits. And then like if I get fruit 1 with post, I can then send new fruits. So I don't need a fruit ID here because that'll be created. So post is when we are creating it. Just won't let me. Let me do a put first. Oh, it won't let me edit it. I'm making some stupid mistake here.
I think you need to add to the body on the top side. Right there. Next to
Sorry. Yeah, thanks. I forgot got to click body here. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay, so and then let me just copy that. Raw. Now I can insert it here. Okay, yeah. Thanks,
Yep.
Jason. That was a little mistake I made here. And then let me just create a new fruit here. I don't know. Kitten Sparrow to stay a little bit with our and then post. The post will create a new fruit, and I'll leave the taste as is. Okay, and I of course have to remove the ID here, and then send it. And now I created a fruit. Fruit ID is 56. So if I now go back to 56, I do a get request, and no body. Send, I get my fruit back and my kitten berry here. So now if I want to update it, that would be a put. And let me change the taste here to cute. Again, raw body. And the colon. Always the details here. Okay, and now I updated the fruit. So basically, you can test the API, you can experiment with it, just using Postman. You have full control over the requests that you're sending. And then let me just delete. That's not a method we can play here that we have implemented. So I just want to delete fruit 56. I don't really need a body here. And just send it. Okay, now the fruit is deleted. Let me try get again. Okay, fruit not found. Yeah? That fruit is marked. If you delete fruits, please only delete fruits that you have created, so not to destroy kind of the exercise for others. But anyway, this was... you can't add new fields here. What a pain. Yep, at least something. Now, I think what a pain here, you experimented a little bit with sort of base64 and such. None of this really should cause any damage here. If you find any sort of undocumented vulnerability, let us know. It's experimenting is definitely fine. I always say there are 2 ways to do these exercises. You can follow the instructions and they'll actually work, which is kind of boring. Or just experiment with it. Break something, please, not too bad, but we have resets button and such if needed. And yeah, and then basically learn something if stuff breaks, stuff doesn't work quite the way you expect it to. And let me know if you're running into issues like, thanks for earlier telling me about, running into issues with the caching and not seeing the options header, because then we can expand a little bit on some of these issues that you run into. Like I said, we don't see your frustrated faces, so please provide us some feedback if something doesn't work. There should also be some surveys and such being posted, so please take a look at them as well. But anyway, Jason, do you want to introduce the next exercise?
Sure thing. Give me 1 second here. All right. So there we go. So Johannes gave you everybody a very, very good detailed overview of REST. So REST is what you actually send to, ask for data, right? Like, as I mentioned, there are different type of API like SOAP, GraphQL, which is another one. Like literally, GraphQL is like running SQL over the request. It's a little bit different, but at the end, the effect is really the same. But I would definitely say 80% of all the APIs out there nowadays are going to be REST. So, yeah. So, one more thing about, Firefox and Chrome. Um, I think some of you were using either one. There's no advantage one way or another. I would definitely say that, Firefox tend to be more integrated because you can actually alter the request within the browser itself. Versus in Chrome, you would actually need to go to Postman to actually change the request. Either way works, but yeah, I I personally like the ease of use with Firefox. Um, but let's get into lab 2. So far, we've got you a little bit of understanding about the entire environment. And we also take a look at the REST API itself. Now, let's take a look at authentication and authorization. Let's get into that. Right. One thing about the authentication here is that clearly we have Keycloak, which is a industry strength type of authentication solution. And it uses what is known as shard, right? Like, as soon as you log in, in the olden days, we used cookie to log into a application and then it try to maintain session, right? Now, in the new world, you see a lot of these authorization header, right? That is like a bearer token, and there are these, big chunk of text that are, sort of a token. It's way bigger than most of the cookie. That's really the subject that we're going to play around with now in this exercise. If you haven't been playing around with it, like most of the web application that you log into, you hear people talk about, the ping, Octa, these solutions, they all use this JOT token to, get you to carry around and be able to authenticate you. How does it work, right? Is really, elaborated here in the lab 2. As you log in earlier, you establish your own username password. Once you log in, the application, as I show you, will give you a token. Okay. You can either, do it like me and go over to, certain request and extract your authorization token, or we actually have a shortcut for you, which is over here to help you extract that JWT token, JWT, JSON Web Token, a lot easier. And one word of advice over here, let me see if I can load up here. When you actually load up this token, I need to log in here myself quickly. As you get the token here, one thing is that when we ask you to copy, make sure to copy the entire chunk of text, okay? Please do. Because, a lot of times people copy half of it won't work, okay? So the first part of it is we ask you to copy it and dump it into Jot.io. Jot.io. Here is a website that actually helps you understand what a Jot actually looks like. a very, very high level overview. Jot basically have three chunks of text separated by a full stop, like a dot, okay? Here's one dot, here's another dot, and you can see this website color code each of those chunks differently. The first part correspond to being the header, and then the second part being the payload, and then the third part being the signature, okay? And you get to play around and take a look at what the payload actually looks like. The payload is what we call claims. Essentially, when you're the user, you carry this claim to say, I am such and such, over here, I'm test@test.com. That's my username. And it says here, I am valid till whatever time, okay? So if you see that, you say, hey, if you're going to present it back to the website, could you not alter it? Could you not tamper with it? Absolutely. Which is why there is a signature here. The signature is signed by the server itself so that anybody, right, can actually validate whether this text was tampered. If the signature does not match, then you know it's tampered and don't accept the token. That's generally how it goes. And why do I actually walk you through all that? First part of the exercise, you'll get to play around with it and understand what is inside the token itself, right? Like there are quite a bit of detail, but it's carried by you as a user to the server. So there is a chance that if I'm malicious, then I can actually say, hi, I'm actually Johannes instead of being Jason. But the signature is there to make sure that that doesn't happen, right? Like spoofing, tampering does not happen. But in part 2 of this exercise, we actually introduce to you a confusion, an algorithm confusion vulnerability. So crypto is hot, right? Um, and some of the websites actually implement crypto incorrectly. Instead of doing the asymmetric two key system, this one actually uses HS, which is a single key system. And that key is actually extractable within, let me see if I can load it up here, the system itself. One thing that I will ask you to do over here is later on, you will be asked, okay, to extract this N thing over here, the two N's, okay? You will be copying the second N, okay, N value, and you're just basically, following the instructions over here. But as you copy the second N value, make sure you do not copy the double quote, okay? This is what you need to copy. And one more additional detail that would be truly helpful is the following. As we will ask you to paste it over into Jot.io. As you paste it, make sure you eliminate this first, okay? I've seen many people just, okay, I click on it and I paste. That doesn't eliminate what is already there. So that's one of the common mistake, and you just paste it, the N value over here, and that's what you would need to do to confuse the bad gateway. And by the way, let me show you, this is the bad gateway. The bad gateway has that confusion issue. Essentially, the bad gateway doesn't recognize the proper encryption scheme and is allowing the user to actually use the single key system so that you're able to spoof your own signature, essentially, okay? And this is rather sophisticated, so as you do the copy and paste, we ask you to do it carefully, okay? And then the last one, the last portion of it is, of this exercise is going to be an optional component, which is API key. Obviously, you've heard about API key. Many of the SaaS provider that you go to is like, hey, yeah, we have API for you. Just use this API key. API key, in a sense, is just a really, really long password. And we want to show you what it really means to use API key. I will tell you this, right? Generally, API key is not really, deemed as very secure, and is deemed as generally a password replacement. And we know that password is not necessarily very secure. And this portion of it, just explore that. With that, those are all the components that you will be exploring in this longer exercise. So let me see, it's about 20 minutes. So we'll set the timer and let you work on it. Johannes, did I miss anything over here?
No, I think you got it pretty well done here. So let's get started. I'll set up a timer again. And yeah, let us know if you also need more time and or run to any other questions. Yeah. I'll set up 20 minutes again for this exercise. So
Yep. And we'll be answering questions, on the Discord. And yeah, we'll be around.
There was one question here. How long will the lab be available beyond the workshop? More or less indefinitely, until Jason runs out on money for his Amazon account that hosts the website. But yeah, it will definitely be available for a while. Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this exercise here. And let me pull up the page here and then just look at the set token part. Oh, I need to log in again. Yeah. So here's my token. And then let me just copy paste this token and take a look at it in JWT.io. We had some discussion here in Discord about JWT.io and different ways to do this. The JWT is just base 64 encoded text. So you can use different tools to basically just take the text here and do something like just base 64 and then use JQ to make that look like nice. Guess didn't quite come out. Yeah. So this is basically the JWT. In the header, you do have the algorithm that we have a JWT. Jason likes to say JOT, but they already named those tokens after him, so he can do whatever he wants with it. And then we have a key ID. That key ID becomes important later. The other important thing here I want to point out is we do have an expiration date for these tokens. So there is some rotation of the tokens built in. That's something we don't get with the API keys. So API keys, they don't sort of have a built-in expiration and key rotation. With OAuth, we get all of that built in, which sort of makes them superior in that sense. Also, always important to check the audience of the key. That's often forgotten because the problem is I could create a token from some authentication server that you trust, but that authentication server may authenticate me, let's say as an administrator, for a completely different application. And the audience basically makes sure that this token was created with your particular application in mind. So that's important here. And then, of course, we have a bunch of other things here, like, for example, what you have access to and such. I don't want to go into too much detail here. And now, what we're going to do next is we are going to fake the token. Now, how do we fake the token? It's digitally signed. It uses a good algorithm. What do we have here? RSA SHA-256. Well, that's the thing. Me, the user, tells you, the relying party, what algorithm was used. Let me just swap quickly here to a whiteboard to explain a little bit what's happening here with algorithm confusion. Let's just share this. So basically, I have my JWT body, and then I digitally sign that with a secret key. If I'm using RSA SHA-256. Okay, now, so basically that's RSA SHA-256. Notice how the key ID was part of the header. So my client is now using the public key to basically verify the token. Now, if I use a different algorithm, what we're going to do here is HMAC, which is a symmetric algorithm. Now I use the same key to create the signature as I'm using to actually validate the signature. So now I can use the public key to create the signature, and that's algorithm confusion. The public key, I know it's public, that's what's called public key. And by changing the algorithm from HMAC, from RSA to HMAC, I'm able now to use the public key, not just to verify the signature, but also to create the signature. So anyway, let's just go back here and do it. Very important here. They do this a little bit weird that they refill it. So actually, first of all, let's switch the algorithm. So here, HMAC SHA-256. Okay, now I can provide a secret here. And then I go to the authentication server. Get that URL here, 1 second. Something I have them here, so I need to look up the exact URL that I need to retrieve that key. Okay. So here, realms. The realms basically just different applications I could authenticate here. Here's our animal shelter application, then protocol, and then here OpenID Connect is the protocol we are using, and then here the certificates being used. Oh, and I even didn't have a typo here. Very unusual for me. And then I basically look up, the right key ID here. I copy the key. That key is meant to be used with RSA SHA-256. That's what you see here. But we use that weakness here in our validation, where we actually are able to create a token with the wrong algorithm. Okay, and then paste it in here. And if I did it right, which is a big if because there's a lot of moving parts here, I should now have here, and you may have noticed how the signature changed. I may have a token here with the wrong algorithm. Okay. Let's type it in here. That token is a little bit shorter. That's just the nature of the symmetric signatures tend to be shorter than asymmetric ones. I update it here and cross your fingers. Let's test it. Yep, it worked. So this token worked. That's algorithm confusion. I could have made some changes here. I didn't want to break it too badly because that's when it's easy to make a little mistake here. But that's was the point here of that exercise. The API keys one, we label it as optional. Not sure how many of you were able to get to it, but let's go to the home page. And wrong link. Let's click on the user info here. So if you have a page where you basically can retrieve user info, including our, admittedly quite short API keys that we have. And if I'm now able to steal those API keys via, for example, some other vulnerability, then I'm able to actually impersonate users. And yeah, so here's our API key. That's where we're using our API key to retrieve the data. And let me just pull this request up here. The other mistake we are making, and that's also sometimes common with API keys, we add them to the URL. And the API keys on the URL are typically, well, a bad idea because that is yet another way how they could potentially be leaked. Here in this particular case, we actually then have like logs and such where you can, for example, retrieve them Let me just show you that. So like these are our logs, and now you can basically, here again, when you're doing the exercise, you're able to sort of look at other people's API keys and then retrieve their information. Feel of course free to use the API key that I just used here, that you can pick up, from these logs, and then it looks like quite a few actually were able to do that part of the exercise. So anyway, that's sort of just a quick run through here of the exercise. Jason, do you want to introduce the third and probably the last exercise we're doing here for this workshop?
Of course I do. 1 second here. Let me just take over the screen. There we go. Cool. And I'm sure that the last exercise got everybody, hands and feet all working together to, craft that token. Uh, Lab 3 is also very, very, very interesting. Like if I have to point out, the topmost issue with API, particularly REST API, it is going to be BOLA. Right? BOLA is broken object level access control. And what that means is that, I'm sure you've seen some of these issues, right? Like, you go to a particular URL, there is a number there, you change it over from 1 to 2, and all of a sudden you're seeing somebody else's data, right? So a security professional, we see that a lot. And why are we talking about it here is not necessarily that, REST is so new that it is, making all these things available. It is all because, with the REST API, think about it, you're pointing to the resources. And a lot of people, when they actually do implement their API, sometimes they're not really thinking through the process, right? Like, your auth problem, authorization. As people write those code, they consider, hey, are you authenticated? If you're authenticated, you're in. But they do not think through, okay, so record 1, Jason can access, record 2, Johannes can access, but Jason cannot. That is the process that, is flawed. So we'll get you to play around with that BOLA, right? And together with that, we're also going to have part 2, which is, we're also going to talk about how to defend first, which is really, really important. Like, to me, learning about the BOLA vulnerability is one thing, but how do you actually avoid that problem is the other. So we'll walk you through all the details. But the other side of it also is BFLA. BFLA is similar to BOLA, but BFLA is, instead of just being able to read the data, get, for example, you're somehow being able to do put and so on. So your application do not restrict what you can do. That's BFLA there. We'll get you to explore that as well. You can tell this is very long. And, again, we'll leave this up and running for a period of time so that you can come back and finish it. We know that this is very, very, very excessive. Hey, but don't complain. This is freebie, and we get a lot of goodies for you. So hey, is you're getting your free money worth. So and then at the very end, we're also going to do an authorization bypass. I will tell you this, right? Like this is the very interesting exercise out of all right over here. So what we're doing over here is that, earlier you did the bypass, right? Like using the bypass one. This one, we actually get you to spoof a particular header. Let me see. I forgot the name of it all of a sudden. It is, I think it's x-user info. Let me see here. Yeah, is that x-user info. So you can tell this is your token, right? Like this is your JOT token details. That was the payload. Where did you see this? You see this over here in the JOT earlier, okay? And we're getting you to, we're getting you to actually spoof this entire detail, okay? So you can spoof to be another user, okay? It's just so that when you do this application, this is the default setup. Johannes and I did not mess around with it, right? Like if you do key cloak and you do Kong, then Kong will automatically pass through the x-user info to the actual API. And many API would use that to say, oh, that's the username. And we're getting you to spoof that username directly, right? Like if you somehow are able to bypass that Kong, okay, then you would be able to do it. You would be able to trigger this effect. And in case you're curious, like how do you actually bypass Kong? Just think that through, right? Like nowadays, with cloud setup, with a lot of your API being in PaaS, like platform as a service type of solution, they're all over the internet. They're all on the internet by itself. It may just be an ACL being missed and so on. And then your endpoint, your actual API endpoint, getting back into this, some of these API endpoints are actually directly bypassable as well, right? That's a very, very high possibility. So that's what we're imitating here to get you to do a bypass yourself. So with that, I think, we've got quite a bit for you to do. That's why the last part is sort of an optional part. Do it at your own leisure. But, I would suggest you to start now. Johannes, did I miss anything? Any other wise words over there? If not, then let's get going.
No, I think you're wise enough. We'll get started with this. I put 15 minutes on the clock, not because I think you'll be done by 15 minutes, but that sort of gets us towards the end, and then I can do just probably the advanced stuff at the end. I'll probably do a quick demo of that. Okay. So as I said, I want to focus on the later part here of the exercise. And part of the challenge here is that, how does the web service behind the API gateway basically know who you are? Well, for the most part, they're just trusting the result of the API gateway. If we can spoof that, if we can fake that, for example, by bypassing the API gateway, then we can impersonate other users. So in this particular case, let's first go to this user URL. We have access to that URL, no problem with that. But this does not give us like API keys or any details. It gives us what may be considered here as public information, like email addresses, addresses, which you would think like as an administrator at least you should have access to. Maybe even as like a member of an organization, you have access to that kind of data. Now, if we want to get more data, we have that user specific access, but for this particular part of the API, we don't have access to. So anyway, that's the basic idea here. But now we want to spoof the X user info header, which is basically just the part of the token that includes the user data, and that we assume is validated already by our API gateway. So let me just get my current token. And just do my F12. And here I am. And let's refresh that. Let's pull one of the requests here. Here are our user requests. Conflict here shouldn't really matter. And let's get the data part here for the token after first dot. Also note, they usually start here with EY because that's basically foreign coded square brackets, that EYJ kind of. I think later it may not because there's some other letters coming after it. Let's see that I find this. If not, it's not really that important because I really only need the first part to decode properly. And yeah, let me just cheat here a little bit. Can't see the dot right now. It doesn't really matter. So just go to the base64 decode.org website. Earlier, someone mentioned CyberChef, a perfectly fine way of doing that as well. Okay, let's decode it. Yeah, you see I have some garbage in the end. That's just from the token. Then let me change my email address here to someone else's. What do we have here as an example? Let's make here just the first one, johndoe@example.com. Okay, and then encode that again. You can also use command line utilities for that. Totally up to you. I'm doing it now the way the instructions suggest you're doing it. Okay. And then encode. So now I have the encoded string here. And then I just go back and add the X user info header. Now, a couple different ways to do that again. Here, let me just do actually, I should have don't we need to copy that first, but just let me reload this. Get sort of that template of a request. Again, here with copy as curl. Let me go to Postman. Come on. Paste the request in here. We're again using the ability to automatically get the headers. Okay, and then one. Yeah, I want a particular. Let me just see that it doesn't work now. So yeah, that's what we expect. And now I can go in here and add the X user info header, which is not the. Come on. Okay. And let me switch back here. Let me get the base64 encoded data. Let's go back and paste it in there. Okay, if I'm lucky, it'll work. Ah, doesn't work. Jason, what did I do? Anything stupid? The token looks good here. Is the authorization token still there? Ah, I changed, yeah, it's bypass, so that should work. That should have worked. I guess that's sort of the last minute demo issue I'm running into here. And let me just try it again. Nope, doesn't work. The authorization header is not set, should not be set here. Well, don't know what I did wrong here, obviously, but yeah, I probably did encode something wrong. That's what usually happens here, where the user token is not recognized. Let me make sure that I have the entire token here. Yeah, I've got the, oh, yeah, I changed it to John Doe. Oh, here, the preferred username. Let me change that, but that shouldn't really matter. It should just be the email address that matters here. Jason, any idea what I did wrong here?
I'm looking. I can't see anything wrong.
Okay,
I think you got
well,
I think you got the email. The important thing is the email
yeah, the
there.
email is the important thing, and I got that in here.
Yeah.
And I just encode it again and copy it again. Usually it's a copy paste mistake with these long and X user info. Yeah, I got the header spelled right here. Nope, doesn't like me today, so I'll leave it up as a demo fluke here. That's what should have worked. You should have seen the user one info here in this case. But anyway, Jason, any final words here?
Well, well, first of all, thanks everyone for, coming to this workshop. There's so much, things that to learn over here. We've only, scratched the surface for, the most prominent issues here. But if you want to learn more, you guys know that Johannes and I both teach the Sec 522 class. So, check us out on that class. And we talk a lot about these issues and so on. Aside from that, there were a few questions about where do you find, additional information about web security or API security. I would definitely check out OAuth project. And, I would definitely start the research from the top 10, right? Like there's top 10 web, there's top 10 API. I would definitely research on those areas first before you move on to other things. Um, yeah, those are, some of my words here.
Yeah, and there was one suggestion to take off the double equal. That's part of the base64 encoding, so I don't think it matters, but let's give it a try. No, that wasn't it, but good guess. What a pain. So definitely have to play with this a little bit more and see why it didn't work. Maybe I got somehow locked out or something. But anyway, yeah, thanks, Jason, here for joining me on this. It was interesting workshop. So all of this will remain up and running, so you can keep playing with it. Thanks everyone for showing up, and hope you liked it. Sorry for that small issue in the end, but I promise it'll work. Just try it again. It'll probably work for you. And we'll also keep an eye on the servers for the next couple hours and such in case they need restarting. But they will be regularly restarted. So like I said, they should be open for quite a while. Thanks. And thanks everybody here for helping out, in particular Ben.
Thank you.